Hello guys, and welcome back to another technical unobtained episode. This is a series in which we not only check out many interesting discontinued features such as wrong data value items, but in which we also update through the versions to check out many discontinued technical features. So let's get right into it. So first of all, at the base here I built this brewing system which was designed by Mango, for which the video link will, as per usual, be in the description. It's a really nice system because it uses alternative items to already make the brewing stand start brewing before the items that will be brewed are actually put in there. So that makes it so that in the time that it takes to do one brewing cycle, it can essentially finish multiple potion modifications. So it can add a nether wart to a potion and add a sugar and add a redstone in the same amount of time it would have took to only do one modification. So that's really interesting, and it also produces one shulker box of potions at the same time. So if we check it out here, we see that the potions are put into these ones, and then after they're finished brewing here, they will be put into the next stand, which is already brewing with another item, so it goes really fast. So it replaces the garbage items, then they're dispensed over here, and then they're all sent over here into this chest, and then we have 27 speed potions. In the nether here, at the center of the nether, I built this piston bolt to take me over to the ender pearl cannon quickly, which is actually our destination, because I built something rather far away in overworld terms, because it's a fortress farm, which is in the nether obviously, and if you want the perfect layout for your fortress, you will have to search pretty far. What you see over here might just sound like one of those clickbait video jokes, but it's actually a functioning portal, because if you look up here, it has a portal frame, because when you fill in frames like this, it does all kinds and sorts of unnecessary checks, and it actually functions. So if I quickly use this here, then the video will become pretty laggy because of all the TNT. And will be teleported. Okay, so now we are here. And this is my nether perimeter. So how I made this perimeter was using a lot of bedrock breaking, using Dragon Axe, which is quite complicated usually, but by abusing instant falling, you can make Dragon Axe break bedrock everywhere, not only in lazy chunks. So I'll just show that off real quick. So here is my instant falling setup portal. It's southwest of the base, and this is what it looks like. You can't see the actual contraption, but I can enable the chunk deblock view. So as you can see, all these green chunks here are chunks that are loaded by the player. Because I've rendered this in 16, it will be a 33 by 33 square. And then we have this 6 by 4 here extending out of it. which is loaded through hoppers. So if I go back a bit, it tried to unload because of the autosave, but because of hopper loading it didn't unload. So this square stays loaded, except for this chunk here, -9 135 in the center, which is a chunk which when generated will place a liquid pocket. And a liquid pocket is one of those waterfalls you can see flowing out of a mountain. So if I check the autosave, okay, and you need to wait for the autosave because otherwise it essentially goes wrong. I don't know why it says it crashed. I'm pretty sure that's a carpet bug. I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually crash. Anyways, this chunk now populated. And if I place dragon eggs, you can see them disappearing, which seems pretty weird, but that's because there are dragon eggs here already, and if I place one, it instantly falls because of instantaltic, and because of the instant falling rule, it replaces the block below it, and it will replace any block. So if we go over to the nether, where we have a lot of bedrock, which is useful for demonstration, I can just do this, and you can really easily break bedrock with this. But T1 designed a flying machine, which is even better for breaking a lot of bedrock because it uses bots which just place bedrock essentially against the wall of the flying machine, and then the dragon eggs are blown up with TNT afterwards, which means more dragon eggs can be placed so you can mine further through the bedrock until there is no bedrock left.
So now that you've all seen how the general perimeter was created, you of course want to know how the actual farm in the center of the perimeter works. It's actually not at the center because the bedrock breaking flying machines, which were designed by T1 as I said, were built up there. So if I built them anyway, I could just let them fly for a bit longer and break more bedrock, and I wouldn't even have to make the world eater any bigger because that would also just fly a bit further. So if you go over here, you can clearly see that there is a lot more space for other farms. I also was planning on destroying the ground bedrock, but I just had too little time, which is also why this video will be the first one I've uploaded in 6 months, so I just had very little time. Anyways, so you see this redstone line, which is very long, long enough to not load the chunks with the portals anymore, and that's the entire purpose also, because this line goes over to unloaded chunks, and when the stage of the redstone changes in 1.12, it will just load the chunks that need to be changed, unlike in newer versions where that just doesn't happen. And you'll also see me not going too close to the farm, because if I'm within 5 blocks of any portals, it will stop working. So in FreeCam I can go there, but in spectator mode that isn't even possible, because if I go too close in spectator it will also break. So how it works is, in these portals you'll currently see that they say the light level 11, and that is a very important aspect of portals, because usually if you just light a portal it will emit light level 11. But these portals actually have light level 0. So why does this light level overlay I have here say that they're 11 even though they're light level 0. So how that works is that the client randomly just updates light everywhere in the world, everywhere in the loaded chunks. So if it observes that there are light levels that aren't correct, it will just update them. But that doesn't happen on the server. So if I would relog, these 11s here would also say they're 0. And you can disable this in Tweakaroo. I'm so good at typing. So if you disable all light updates, that weird lighting stuff won't happen anymore. So if I relog quickly, log back in, then without changing anything about the world, you can see that these light levels will say 0 now. So in light level 0 portals, mobs can spawn. So how did this happen? Because I said before that portals usually, when you light them, have light level 11, and that isn't what's happening here. So how this works is, in these dispensers there is flint and steel. So when they're powered, they place a fire block over here, and then once again in 1.12 everything can load chunks. So even though there is a chunk border halfway through this portal, the portal checking if it's a valid portal block will just load this chunk and then place all the portal blocks. But why doesn't the light get placed if the portal blocks get placed in these unloaded chunks? Or they are loaded, but they're loaded because of the placement. So how that works is, when a light level placement is within 16 blocks of an unloaded chunk, it will not process any light levels. So this 1.12 type of light suppression is much easier than the big contraptions you have to build in 1.14 plus. But because of the client light updates, it took a long time for it to actually be discovered, because people had to read the code. Because otherwise, if the client light updates wouldn't have happened, then people would have found out about this weird bug much earlier. And what's actually interesting is that Panda4994, who is currently a developer for Mojang, actually discovered this bug a very long time ago in 1.8, but he just didn't explain it in his video, and he went on with his day, and he could have used it for so much more. But what happened in his video was that a snow block got pushed into a block, into a block that was air before and which had light level 14 before. So this inside of the snow block was a high light level, and that made the snow actually melt. So a full snow block can melt if there is a high light level inside of it, but usually that doesn't happen because they're solid blocks and they block light. So he discovered that they can melt, and then he said, well, that would be terrible for my world, because the half of the stuff in my world is built out of snow, so I hope they never patch this bug. And then he went on, even though he could have designed these massive portal farms where mobs can spawn, because the light level is 0 instead of 11. So how are they within 16 or within 17 blocks of unloaded chunks? Well, I'm all the way at the end of that line. I'm not loading these chunks. And dispensers have a 4-tick cooldown, so when they're powered, they'll wait for 4 ticks or 2 repeater ticks, and then they will place the fire. Then they'll actually fire. So they wait for that, and because the fire gets placed later, you need to have a repeater here at the chunk border, which doesn't load this next chunk too early. Because obviously, if this repeater would load this chunk too early, then these portals wouldn't be within 17 blocks of an unloaded chunk, so that wouldn't work then. But this contraption is very easy to set up. I just built this in an afternoon, so this wasn't difficult at all. The only thing I had to think about a bit was to use the entirety of the fortress crossroads. You need to have a 20 block wide portal, at least, at the minimum. But portals can be 22 blocks wide, so these 2 blocks of this portal aren't actually within the fortress crossroad, and that's just in order to have a dispenser there firing here, because that's why the player needs to be so far away. A player can't go near this after the portals have been lit, because randomly around the player also some light updates get done. So within 5 blocks of the player, server side, there are also light updates. So you can't just go near this and then break dispensers or something, because then the light updates, the random light updates will break everything and make it lit up, and then mobs can't spawn. And in the overworld there is a solution for this, because in the overworld you actually have access to RNG manipulation, so you can manipulate the random light updates to just happen on one player who isn't near this. But in the nether you don't have access to any RNG manipulations, so then there is no way to prevent these random updates from happening. So then you'll have to just have to make a repeater line, and that honestly isn't that hard. It's like very little work for such a good farm. Then you see these blobs up here made out of pistons, which looks a little weird, because pistons are the only blocks, as far as I know, that don't increase the height map. So the height map is a whole thing on its own. You will have to watch a different video to get an explanation for that. So they essentially don't allow for mob spawning, which makes the farm below a bit faster. But they do suffocate mobs. So glass also doesn't increase a height map, but it doesn't suffocate the mobs. And why do I want to suffocate mobs? Well, there is a portal in here, and when a magma cube spawns inside of the farm, it gets transferred to the overworld, and then if it's a large magma cube, they get killed, and then the small magma cubes go back through the portal and they end up in here, in the higher portals, not the lower ones, because these lower ones are at 70 or something, so essentially sea level, and this portal is a bit higher, and the portals in the overworld are built up high too, which is something you'll see later when I explain the killing system. So then the magma slimes come back here, and because the portal doesn't have a valid exit or something, or no, because the portal shape in the overworld is not a valid portal, they'll just end up here in the ground and be suffocated. Which is obviously important that they die quickly, which is not something which is easy to do with mobs that are essentially immune to fall damage and immune to fire. So in order to clear up the mob cap quickly, you can just use suffocation for that. It isn't the most efficient thing you can do, but it's okay, I guess. So now in the overworld there is a quick portal here, and here you can see the killing system. So I'll just explain that in the next clip. So in the overworld here is the killing system for the mobs, because they go through the portal, but then obviously we need to kill them using a player interaction, because only players make wither skeletons drop skulls, and in my thumbnail I claimed that this farm drops 1500 skulls an hour. So in here there is a player with a looting sword who is slapping mobs here, which come through this update suppressed portal, which is very easy to do in 1.12 using the instant tick I've shown before, because you can make a comparator clock and then just break blocks next to it on a specific site and it wouldn't update anything. So that's very easy to do. And then over here is the lever for the pickup system, because these hopper minecarts obviously can pick up items very fast, and they're on top of 9 hoppers which are operating at double hopper speed. So I believe they transfer an item like once every 4 ticks, so that's 2.5 items per second, and that times 9. So I'm not sure if my math is correct here, but that's pretty fast. And then we have droppers here, sets of 2, so we need for the one dropper can operate at 2 times hopper speed because of that 4 tick delay I talked about before. And then at the center here we have 1 extra dropper, so that makes 9 together. And then they drop all their items in this water stream bit here, and then they go over and go to just some 1 time hopper speed item sorters. And I'm losing a fair bit of items. I know that, because you also need to get rid of all of this garbage, obviously, because the player kills, they also drop bows and swords and stuff you don't need. And then when there is a peak of production, so when there are like 50 blazes coming through at once and they are all killed within 1 minute, then the 2 sorters I have assigned for blaze rods are not fast enough. But in general, on average, these hoppers and shulkerbox fillers are actually fast enough for the production of this farm. And obviously you're making a lot of bones, because the wither skeletons have the highest chance to spawn in this area, in the crossroad part of the fortress. And you can see I already have a lot of wither skeleton skulls, because I used hopper counters to count how many items the farm was producing, and I'm pretty sure those do not operate at 2 times hopper speed, so it might actually be more, and it depends on luck, obviously, how many skulls it produces, but 1500 skulls is about a shulker box an hour. So we have 3 of these killing systems, as you can see, which are interconnected using piston bolts, and that's because the farm in the nether is so big that it isn't able to correspond to 1 portal, so you are stuck with making a bit more portals. But in this case that's actually very nice, because there are so many items coming through that if you don't have 3 collection systems, then many items will get lost, or you will have to make a much more advanced and efficient collection system. So at the bottom here are some of Ilmango's shulkerbox fillers. Very simple, 1 times hopper speed, just like the sorters. And then there's more garbage over here, and a lot more wither skeleton skulls. So, and in the other side you'll also see that. So, and there's also, in order to not make the killing bots, which have the looting 3 swords, die, you obviously need regeneration beacons, or they'll die of hunger. And you need to make sure they have mending swords, because otherwise they'll break, obviously. And sharpness 5 is definitely handy to have to kill the mobs a little quicker to crack down on the lag this farm creates. I have a pretty decent CPU. Where is it? Yes, here. So this CPU can operate the farm at like 30 MSPT, I think, 30 to 35 MSPT. So that's alright for me, but if you have a lower end PC, I definitely recommend making such a farm smaller scale, so only one crossroad maybe, because it can create a lot of lag. And on my old PC, I can definitely imagine it would lag a lot. So over here, the beacon, which is max size for the regeneration. And oh yeah, the fire block we have back here is to burn the XP, because the player is over here, so the XP rolls over here, and then the player picks all that it can pick up, but the player in Minecraft can only pick up 10 XP balls per second, if I remember correctly, and then the balls would just move around the player and collect here, and because they're entities, they're pretty laggy. So what you want to do is have a fire block so that when they pass through the player, they'll get killed by the fire. So you don't get a lot of lag. I did not know this before, and then I just got like a gargantuan amount of lag. So that's really not recommended. A roof up here against lightning strikes is handy. And of course lava at the end of the sorting system in order to burn all the garbage you get. And I made some garbage collection here in order to check if there was like a lot of blaze rods in here. I would obviously need to add an extra sorter, but it was alright, so that wasn't necessary. Yeah, that was it for the explanation, I think. Thanks for watching this 9th installment of the Technical Unobtained series, in which we, as I said before, explore both discontinued technical features and regular discontinued features. So I would call this light suppression in 1.12 definitely one of the technical features, which is really interesting, which is discontinued. So I hope you guys liked this episode, and I hope I can catch you in the next one. Bye bye.